Welcome, Raider sports fans, to the Ross Raider Wrap-Up. I'm your host, Matt Harrelson, and of course, alongside with me for the ride, Deon Cranford. I feel like it's been forever since I've seen you, buddy.
It has, man. Been busy, but I'm glad to be back. So
absolutely. Lots going on. Of course, a lot of the seasons are starting to wrap up here as we get closer to graduation time.
Yep.
And, of course, a lot of the teams that we're going to talk about just celebrated a lot of their seniors. Let's start with softball. And everybody expected the Lady Raiders to have another great season, and that's exactly what we're seeing. 16-2 overall, 12-1 in the SAC. Already claimed the SAC title. What else can be said about these ladies?
Well, I mean, we talked towards the beginning of the season about, was there really anybody in this conference that was a threat for Richmond? And I named two schools, Jack Britt and Lumberton. Mm-hmm. And, the Jack Britt games were good, kind of expected. And then, Lumberton actually got a win over them. That's Richmond's one loss in conference play. Not a huge surprise there that they got, maybe the way that Lumberton won, but not a huge surprise that Lumberton beat Richmond. But Richmond did what they do. I mean, you lose one conference game, you're probably going to win the title, or at least at the very least share it. And in this case, Jack Britt and Lumberton just lost games to other opponents and each other, so that kind of gave Richmond the gap they needed to take the titles.
So they've obviously been very dominant this year, not only at the plate, but on the pitcher's mound, defensively. But talk to us a minute about how they've able to, claim the SAC title already.
Well, I mean, obviously there's some good pitching in this conference, and then there's some teams that are kind of down. I think I feel like like I mentioned before, Jack Britt and Lumberton were really the only major factors in this, because everybody else seemed to just be a little down. Even Scotland. I mean, Richmond just seemed to just dominate Scotland, and Richmond and Scotland used to be a good softball battle. So. So I mean, it's just been doing what they do. They really haven't decreased talent wise. They probably have actually stepped up their game since the beginning of the season. And whereas I think the conference may have been a little bit down on them this year, and it allowed them to coast through a lot of those games. But I mean, when you can hit 30+ home runs a season, when you got a pitcher like Grayson Way that can just strike out after strike out after strike out, I mean, I think all the pieces of the puzzle were always there. I don't think there was ever any huge doubt they weren't going to win the conference. But.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the Lady Raiders' 7th straight conference championship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think one of the things perhaps that gets overlooked is to be able to have that kind of continuity year after year, especially when you're losing, major parts of your lineup and pitching staff to graduation.
Well, we've talked about that. Richmond seems to somehow, or the softball team, I guess you say, seems to somehow consistently stay young. I mean, there's always freshman talent on the team. There's always sophomore talent on the team. And
Aaliyah Sweeney, a prime example of that, already committed to Duke.
Yeah, I mean, and then you think all three of the seniors this year all have college plans. I mean, it's just amazing to watch how. But again, I just said 3 seniors. I mean, that's it. And most of those players are remaining, and a lot of the players that didn't get starting time this year still played a lot. In a lot of those big wins. So I mean, they're not even gonna slow down next year. I mean, it's just gonna keep coasting right along, and they're gonna be. I can't imagine them losing the conference championship next year. I think they're gonna win another one. So.
I hope you are 100% correct on that. Now I've got some stats here on a graphic that you were nice enough to make for the RO Sports Show's Facebook page. So I'm just going to read this straight off here. The title is Richmond versus the SAC, of course, the Sandhills Athletic Conference. In conference play, Richmond as a team has had 402 plate appearances. They accumulated 122 hits, drew 56 walks or hit by pitches, and 25 batters reached on an error or a dropped third strike. What that means is that 1 out of every 2 batters for Richmond got on base in conference games. That's incredible.
That is incredible, man. And I know a lot of that fact. I know the games like you get 71st, for example, kind of factor into
41
that.
41-0 in a doubleheader.
So, I mean, I know it factors into that, but they still did that pretty consistently, even against some of the better teams. So, I mean, it's just amazing what they're doing to play. They can bat well from positions 1 through 9, and they've been doing that for 7 years. That's not uncommon. And they're doing a good job at moving the batters around the plate. And then of course the home runs. I don't even remember what the count is right now. But at one point they were averaging almost 3 home runs a game. I think that's tapered off a little bit, but they're still probably around 2. So
that's a tough number to keep up for a whole year.
Yeah, but and even that statistic didn't even count the season finale against Scotland. We had calculated that before that game as well. So it went up a little bit, but just an impressive statistic, impressive job at the plate. And again, defensively, I'll be honest with you, defensively, that's where their kind of shortcomings have been a little bit. And don't get me wrong, they're not bad by any stretch of the imagination, but they've had some, missed throws to first base to get easy outs and things like that. And that's how teams like Lumberton and teams like Jack Britt were able to keep those games close and battle them. But and it's very minor miscues.
Right.
Other than that, they're doing fantastic on pretty much all aspects of the game.
All right, and as I mentioned at the top of the show, Lady Raiders, just like a lot of the sports, are beginning to wrap up, getting ready for playoff play. So I guess before we move on to baseball, and you've kind of already touched on this, but what has impressed you the most from the Lady Raiders? Doesn't necessarily have to be a single player, or it could be pitching, offense, home runs, whatever.
Well, pretty much definitely hitting. Their plate appearances are just ridiculous, and their at bats are. Their statistics are just phenomenal, and not just in home runs, but in RBIs. They're just a great hitting team. And again, they've gone up against really good pitchers from Jack Britt, really good pitchers from Lumberton, and some really good outside the conference pitchers. Only one I can think of actually made them struggle, and that was the pitcher from Marlboro Academy, but she's from Richmond County as well.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
So and again,
and she's D1 material, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and we're all looking at this, from a Richmond point of view, especially for like this show and for the RO. But in reality, a lot of these girls from Richmond play with a lot of these girls from the other schools, during travel season, during these camps and things like that. So they're familiar with one another, and so when they get to these games, it's funny to see the camaraderie. You'll get these heated games, these Richmond, Scotland, Richmond, Pinecrest, but the girls are like, hey, how y'all doing? We haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah.
So
the fans, not so much.
No. And don't get me wrong, they're not trying to win, but there are connections, and it's good to see that. So, I think, again, Richmond's had a phenomenal season. I expect them to go deep in the playoffs again. And we'll talk a little bit about next week once we do baseball, because baseball and softball will be together next week. But then when we come back from Easter, everybody will be in the conference tournament.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to maybe a Richmond-Lumberton final in that conference tournament championship.
We will have to wait and see. Of course, we'll let you know all about that here on the wrap-up. Now, as you mentioned, let's talk about baseball. Guys also having a really good season, 15-5 overall, 11-2 in the SAC. I feel like we've mentioned this several times, but when we interviewed head coach Ricky Young before the season started, it was pitching by committee to replace all of those ace pitchers that they lost to graduation. It was scratch out enough runs to win ball games, play great defense, and put pressure on opposing defenses by putting some guys on base and stealing them. Did all of that come to fruition this year?
I think so. One of the most impressive moments this season for me, as far as a fan and as far as being able to cover the team, Richmond had a Terry Sanford game sandwiched in between their Hoke County games, and obviously they wanted to save their best pitcher for the conference games. Even though Hoke County was a team they should have been able to beat, anyway, they wanted to save their best pitchers for that one. So that whole pitch by committee thing came into play, and when they went to Terry Sanford, a team that was undefeated and playing well and just beating everybody badly, I was like, who in the world, are they going to put into this game?
Right.
And they gave Evan Hudson his first start of the season, and Richmond won.
Yeah.
And just to think that they can just kind of keep pulling these guys out and putting these guys on the mound. And again, it's such a senior heavy, team, and all these guys are getting their chance on the mound. Tyler Bass has been up there. Luke Pressler actually pitched both games in the doubleheader against 71st, so to get two wins
and
in
won,
about
which doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, to get 2 wins in about 2 hours, that's kind of impressive, if you're a pitcher. But even if it is against a team like 71st, but I don't know. And then Hunter Paris, he's been the lead guy this season. He's carried
this season.
Cameron Caraway had a rough start, early on because they played some pretty stiff competition. But then once he got settled in and got playing into the conference, he's been doing really well. So they've been getting a lot of guys on the mound. They had won 9 straight, and then they kind of hit those back-to-back losses against Charlotte Christian and Scotland, and it kind of it kind of hurt them a little bit. But Charlotte Christian, again, I mean, that's private school, always good.
I was about to say, I remember when I was in high school playing for Richmond, we would go to Charlotte and play Charlotte Christian. They were good then. They're still good now, I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you go to their stadium, you almost feel like you're at a small college field.
Yes.
I'm at the press box, and it was just a beautiful facility. And they had a pitcher. I swear he was probably bigger than Jake Ransom. You know, I mean, he's just a big old guy, and he just didn't look built like a pitcher, but he could throw some heat, and he actually hit a home run in that game. So I mean, they just had some studs, and I'm not saying Richmond couldn't have beat them. They did have an off night, but again, that's one of those games that you play for the experience and to improve improve you for the playoffs. But that one did sting a little bit, and then of course to follow that up with a conference loss to Scotland when they pretty much had the conference title in hand.
And correct me if I'm wrong, is that the one where Hunter pitched like 5 innings of no-hit ball and then they ended up losing?
Well, I mean, he pitched 5 innings no-hit ball. He only gave up 2 hits in the game.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was a complete game. Definitely not Hunter's fault. It was just one, they couldn't get any hits at the plate. They just couldn't help them.
Yeah.
But again, Scotland had Johnson. I'm trying to think of his first name. Michael Johnson. I always remember that. Michael Johnson on the mound. And Johnson did a fantastic job, too. So, I mean, it's no disrespect to Scotland, but Richmond just had an off night at the plate.
Speaking of throwing guys on the mound, have we seen the help me out with his name, that played basketball for Richmond?
Nige?
Yeah, have we seen any more of Nige Stroman?
I haven't seen any more of Nige Stroman. It was fun to see him get up there because his height, and he's a lefty, and I mean it was just like when you watched his pitches from like ground level behind the umpire, it was almost like his pitches were going straight down, but they were falling into the strike zone. And but yeah, I would love to see. But again, he's a sophomore, right. So we haven't seen the last of him. But
we haven't. Somebody who's not a sophomore, unfortunately, is senior Jake Ransom, and you mentioned him. Now he started the season off with 2 grand slams in like a matter of just a handful of games. Now, obviously, that's a pace that's tough to keep up, and I know that Ricky said that home runs were not something they were going to rely on this season. But have they hit more home runs than we've seen them hit in years past?
No, definitely not. I mean, they're not hitting a lot of home runs. Now, they're hitting some deep balls into play. They're finding those gaps in the outfield and that kind of thing. So they're putting the bat on the ball a lot. And to be honest, they're not striking out a lot. I mean, I'm not saying they're getting a lot of hits, but they're not striking out a lot. So they're making contact. They're making good swings. And, just unfortunately in some of these games where they've kind of struggled to put runs on the board, they're just hitting the ball into play. They're hitting easy ground balls to the infielders and that kind of thing. And but I mean, again, they're not striking out. They're not to me. I don't feel like they're making a lot of bad decisions at the plate. They're swinging at the ones that they can make contact with, and they're making contact. So I mean, it's just about just getting that bat in just a little bit better position and putting those put a little height on the ball and maybe drop them into the outfield. So.
Now, as you mentioned, both softball and baseball are going to be basically finishing up the season at a Easter tournament, correct? Mm-hmm. So what can we expect to see against the Raiders in that tournament?
Well, the Beach Diamond Invitational, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not as familiar with the baseball side of it as the softball side of it because Richmond softball team's been competing in this for years. It's actually one of my favorite sporting events at Richmond to watch.
You get to go to the beach.
Well, yeah, that too. But a lot of people, especially those who kind of stay on the football side of things, you look at the divisions real heavy: 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A. Who is that? But what you don't understand is in baseball and softball, a lot of the stronger teams are in the smaller divisions. Now, I'm not saying there's anything bad about the 4A, but there's some great. I think I've even said on this show, Richmond versus Whiteville in softball is one of my favorite Raider meetings of any sport. So, and Whiteville's I think maybe 1A, maybe 2, but they were 1A for a while. But you get a lot of these East Coast teams in the Beach Diamond Invitational. You get the Columbus County teams. You get the Brunswick County teams, and those schools that are just really, really good. And it's just always a really good event. Especially in softball, it's usually pretty evenly matched. Most of the games are really close and really exciting. Baseball, on the other hand, I'm not as familiar with that side. Richmond, to the best of my knowledge, has only appeared in this event once in baseball. They, for the past few years, they have been traveling down to Hilton Head for that tournament.
Okay. I was going to say, I thought they still went to some beach.
Oh, yeah. And the Hilton Head event was a little bit, I think, bigger and attractive. They would be playing teams from like Pennsylvania, and, that would get a bigger audience. But maybe the timing of it or where Easter fell or something like that kept them out of that. I'm not sure, but I'm excited that they're both going to be in the same place. And I'll tell you this, for anybody that may attend, and if Richmond's baseball team and softball team winds up playing at the same time, you want to watch both games, this is just in case you're going the visitor side on the baseball field. Raises up, and if you stand at the top, you've got a good overlook at both fields simultaneously. I mean, they're right there together.
Just need maybe a set of binoculars. You're good to go.
Oh yeah, you're good to go. Well, you don't even need that much of binoculars because unfortunately, them fields are very close. You got a lot of foul balls flying in the other field and that kind of thing.
So speaking of the Diamond Invitational, is it kind of odd for them to end the season with the Easter tournament, or is this kind of how the calendar worked out this year?
It's, with Easter just fell late. Absolutely. I mean, we even talked about that, at the beginning of the season, how odd it's going to be. They're going to have all their conference games done before the Easter tournament. But then the good news is they'll come back and they'll play a few more conference games in the conference tournament. But this is, to me, the timing's almost perfect because it's going to give them a chance to step away from the teams they're familiar with. Face some different teams, some different players, and really get prepared for the playoffs. So it's actually, even though it's kind of a strange time, it's actually a pretty convenient time in terms of being prepared.
Getting ready for the playoffs, what do the Raiders need to work on, if anything, to go far in the playoffs, whether it be SAC or just the state tournament?
Well, I guess for the baseball team, they've got to be a little more consistent at the plate. Mm-hmm. It's not that they're not getting hits, but they're not putting them together. But they've been able to make up, like what you said, with their speed. I mean, just on the bases, they're great at stealing bases. They're great at turning a single into ending up on third base. So
a Ricky Young mantra.
Yeah. So I mean, but if you get into those games where unfortunately you need 4, 5, 6 runs to win,
right?
You just got to string those hits together, and they're not doing it right now. I'm not saying they can't and they haven't, but they're just not right now, and that's something they're going to have to improve on.
All right, and just like I asked you about the Lady Raiders, what's impressed you the most about the Diamond Raiders?
Well, as I mentioned, that Terry Sanford game was probably my top moment of the season because I'll be honest with you, when I went there, I was not expecting Richmond to win that one. I'm not trying to down them or anything, but I wasn't expecting Richmond to win. And for them to come away from that with a victory, that was a pretty big deal. I think the victory over Pinecrest this year was a big one. Oh, yeah. And I think the fact that they swept Jack Britt was also very big because I was thinking Jack Britt was going to be a major player in that one. And that, to get that sweep, that was a big deal, especially since Jack Britt beat him last year. So.
All right. That's going to do it for baseball talk. Let's head over to the soccer field and talk about the Raiders soccer team. Also having a great year, 12-3 overall, 10-2 in the SAC. Already, as you mentioned, claimed second under Pinecrest. Usually it seems like it's Pinecrest and then everybody else. But for us to already have claimed second, that's kind of a victory in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably going to be one of their better finishes in a while. Of course, they had a good season last year. Last year they actually finished, I believe it was third under Pinecrest and Jack Britt. They were 17-6 last year, 11-3. So it looks like they're going to finish kind of in that same area. But and unfortunately, Kyle's probably the better one to go to because this year they put soccer on the same nights as baseball and softball, and it's made it really difficult for us to kind of keep up with what all's going everywhere. But Chris Larson has just stepped in there, and I mean, just unbelievable results with the soccer programs, both the boys and the girls, and I think they're just having a stellar year. I would love to see them be maybe like a third-round team or further, but I just want them to get over that hump and win a few playoff games. And I think this team's probably capable of doing it. They're pretty deep. They're getting scoring from a lot of different players. So.
And speaking of Chris Larson, this, of course, in the fall with the boys team, that was his first time coaching them. This is, of course, his first time coaching the Lady Raiders soccer team, of course, taking over for Benny Howard, who was the coach for, 30 years, something like that. So that's obviously some big shoes to fill, a lot of pressure. Doesn't really seem like he skipped a beat, though, does it? I mean, how much has he been impressive,
Yeah, I mean, he knows the game, obviously, and, I love the fact that they're hiring from within the program, so to speak. They're hiring an alumnus, and, so he's got more in it than just winning ball games, I mean, it's his school. It's got that school pride factor, and I mean, everybody likes him, so, I mean, he's doing a fantastic job. I'm impressed. I mean, I've been around a while following Richmond sports, and we haven't had too many girls soccer teams win this many games and finish in the top part of the conference standings. So it's exciting.
It absolutely is. So, of course, congratulations to them on a really good season so far.
I'm sinking.
They also have the playoffs coming up. So, real quick before we move on, what do they need to do to move on into the tournament?
Well, again, and unfortunately, I've only seen them play a handful of times this season, but I think they need to consistently keep a lot of players active, a lot of players threaten to score. I think defensively and especially in the goalkeeping position, they seem to be doing really well. They're keeping a lot of teams off the scoreboard. It's so funny to be following these games, and I think they beat 71st 10-1, and I'm just. As someone who's like I said, followed Richmond sports for a long time, I'm used to seeing us kind of on the opposite end of some of those games. So it's exciting. Plus, they also have a lot of experience playing under pressure. Those Purnell Sweat games, both of them were close. Mm-hmm. One of them, went into extra time, and then I believe one of the Jack Britt games did as well. So I like this team. I think all the pieces are there. I think they've got great experience. They've got great coaching. They've got great talent. And I would love to see them be like a third-round team when it's all said and done. All
right. Hopefully we will see that. And then finally for Raider Sports, let's head to the golf course. And, of course, right now golf is on a lot of people's minds and tongues because of Tiger just winning the Masters.
Yep.
But Richmond Raider Golf, I don't know what's going on. A lot of fifth-place finishes, though, every week. Fifth place. That's tough to do.
Well, it's unfortunate. And I think the standing order has pretty much stayed consistent, even in the 4 spots above us. Unfortunately, the problem right now is, the top 4 teams actually can go in and compete in regionals as a team. After that, it goes to individuals, and the number of individuals that Richmond can send are going to depend on how many teams that our conference gets in. And right now, with 71st kind of not really participating in these tournaments, we don't know if we're going to get 3 or 4, and that's going to really depend on how many players that Richmond can get into this. I see, if everything plays out well, I see the same 3 for regionals that went last year as 9th graders. They're going to go back again as 10th graders. Jonathan Rich, Jacob Puckett, Carter Richardson. I pretty much sure that all of them did enough to qualify. It's just going to be if those spots are available in our conference to get them in.
And, just reading through stories that you guys have written regarding golf, it seems like it's kind of been Jonathan Rich leading the pack and then kind of everybody else. But he seems like he's a bona fide stud on the course.
Well, last year he didn't have last year he kind of sat around the 80, 80, 82, that kind of number.
It's terrible.
But, this year he's dropping into the 70s, and if he could just go up to Pinehurst and have a great day at regionals and a great day in state, he might finish somewhere up there in the top. And again, he's a 10th grader, so there's room to actually advance that in the future. But yeah, he's something else. I think I want to say at Pinehurst number 6, his first 2 holes, I want to say he was already like 4 over, but then he just kind of mellowed out and kind of finished strong and had a good day. Yeah. So it's good to see that kind of, because I'm gonna tell you, I couldn't play golf. After about 2 bad holes, my clubs would be in the water. I'd be going home.
That's why I switched to disc golf, Deon. I had to give up club golf.
So to just maintain that focus, and again, what's interesting about golf matches is it kind of strips away that team mentality, because even though your scores are going together as a team, you're an individual player playing with individual players from other schools while your teammates are off on other holes. Yeah. So you don't have that camaraderie. You don't have that person there cheering you on, and
right.
So it's a different mentality, and it's interesting to go out and watch. But those guys know what they're doing. It's impressive. They're out there measuring distance, and figuring out which club to use, and they don't really need a whole lot of guidance and help. They know what they're doing.
Well, I'll tell you what. I used to be a caddy at Pinehurst Country Club. So anytime you guys are playing, 1 through 9, now you need a caddy, I'm your man. So real quick before we move on. The golf team, do you know, are they a relatively young squad this year, kind of mixed? What is it?
Well, they have no seniors, so
okay.
they're somewhat young. I believe they had 2 juniors and maybe like 6 sophomores, and then a couple of freshmen.
So still a lot of room for improvement as we move into the next couple of seasons. All right. And then finally, This isn't Raider Talk, but we figured we'd include the middle school sports report. So what is there to report from the middle schools?
Well, one of the big things I want to mention is that, we don't have – I think, and a lot of people are kind of understanding this with Richmond County having 4 middle schools. A lot of the talent's diluted. Everybody's kind of everywhere. Whereas in Scotland County, they've only got 2 middle schools, and a lot of their strong athletes are at Carver, and Carver just seems to win everything.
Yeah.
Everything. And I'm not knocking Carver. I mean, they do have some great athletes, and they do a really good job. So I mean, Carver's kind of dominating the baseball and softball sphere, but the Ellerby Middle School girls team has gone undefeated. In the regular season, they'll take the number 1 spot in the playoffs. So I just want to give a shout out to them because that's very impressive. And especially since last year, it was Richmond. Good grief. It was Rockingham and Hamlet actually playing for the conference title. So they've stepped up and actually surpassed both of them this year.
Nice.
And so it's good to see, some of these schools stepping up. The boys soccer teams are also doing really well. You've got Rockingham, Hamlet. Probably Rockingham and Hamlet will be the only 2 getting first-round home games, or at least home games in their first home game. On the girls' side, you've got Ellerby finished first, Hamlet finished second, Rockingham finished third, so all of them should get home games in their first game. And I'm saying it that way because I believe the top 2 get a bye.
Okay.
So whoever's third is still going to get a home game, but it's going to be in the first round and not the second. But so, they're all finished at the top of the bracket. So soccer's actually been really exciting. Softball has also been exciting. You had Carver who won it, but right now Anson, Rockingham, and Hamlet are in a 3-way tie for second.
Oh, wow.
They all had 2 losses. They each lost to Carver. Rockingham beat Hamlet. Hamlet beat Anson. Anson beat Rockingham. So it's a even 3-way tie.
They're just beating up on one another.
And I've talked to a couple of the coaches, and nobody's 100% sure on how they're going to break that for the playoffs. But it's going to be fun if Rockingham and Hamlet can finish 2 and 3 in one order or the other. So that way they'll have a good chance to meet each other again, and we'll get that good classic rivalry game again.
Sounds good. It also sounds like not just Raider sports, but Richmond County sports from middle school to the high school. I mean, sounds like everybody's having a great season so far. So really glad to hear that. So anything else we're missing before we close up shop?
Not in this one, but I'm excited. I guess we'll have an Easter break, but I'm excited to get back and see how the tournament goes up in Brunswick County and how the playoffs kind of shape up. And I'm looking forward to the postseason. I almost hate that the school year is almost over.
Another one is passing us by. Real quick, to wrap up the wrap-up, softball. Is it state championship or bust this year? As we currently sit. I know I've asked you that earlier in the season, but now that we're finishing it up.
I don't think it's state championship or bust because, like I said, they're going to have probably 2 or 3 more good years after this one with the roster they got, and I'm not even including the ones that are coming up. So I will say this. It's shaping up to where it's really, really kind of looking Richmond's favor. They're playing well. A lot of their big competition, and I'm not making an excuse, but a lot of the big competition have kind of bowed out of the 4A division. You've got schools like Alexander Central. You've got schools at Cape Fear. You've got schools, all these really, really, really good softball schools that are no longer 4A. So not only do you have Richmond playing really well, but you're even having some of the teams that have really kind of given them fits over the last few years kind of moving out of the way.
Right.
I really felt like they were the state champion last year. I think they were the best team. I still disagree with a lot of the calls at South Caldwell. I still argue that. I don't know. I mean, I feel like they're playing like they can win the title, but there's just so many South Caldwell-like teams out there that kind of sneak up and pop up on you. So they just need to stay consistent at the plate. I think they'll win it.
All right. Well, hopefully before the season, for the school year is over, rather, we'll have a couple of state championships, a couple more trophies to put in the trophy case out at Richmond Senior High School.
And we'll make one last comment.
Yeah.
Me and Kyle are going to be working soon on our top Raider moments from the school year.
Okay.
So, if you're out there watching and you got any you want to throw in the comment section and say, hey, don't forget this one.
Yeah.
Throw it down there because we'll be talking about that.
Absolutely. And again, everything we've talked about, you and Kyle do a great job of, covering, contributing when it comes to RO Sports. We really appreciate you guys doing that. Doing a wonderful job. Seems like no stone goes unturned when it comes to Richmond County sports. So, Anyway, again, you can read all that on the Richmond Observer, and you can also download the RO app for your Android or Apple device, and it's free. Doesn't cost you a dime. So
You can pay us if you want to.
yeah. We'll take donations, of course. But anyway, that's going to do it for this edition of the Ross Raider Wrap-Up. That's Deon Cranford. I'm Matt Harrelson. Go Raiders. We'll see you right back here next week.